To the board meeting, it is 7. Please rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First up, Dave, do you have any questions on attendance? And if everybody did sign in, that helps too. But do you have any questions?
Yeah. Which ones are?
He's gonna sign in. All right. On to agenda approval. Does anyone have any additions or corrections to the agenda?
I'd like to make an addition if I could. I'd like to make a motion to add discussion on the activity bus route.
I'll second the motion.
Anything else? So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, next up is open forum. Rules for open forum. There are 3 minutes per speaker. Open forum shall not take more than a total of 15 minutes. No complaints about individual staff members. All presenters will conduct their business in a manner that meets community standards for decorum. The board will not take action on items presented in open forum. Would anybody like to speak?
Do you want me to come up there, or?
Whatever you are comfortable with.
All right, so just to address the board, staff, and parents, my name's Holly Alleman, and I live 8 miles west of Finlayson with my husband Trent and 2 daughters. We chose Finlayson Elementary for our children, as it was well respected and convenient for us. Throughout the years, our daughters have attended. We've come across very few issues, but it wasn't until the activity bus was taken away this year that made it difficult for us to continue to see a future for our children here. This is something we were looking forward to as our children moved to the high school for accessibility purposes. I was told that 3.9 students utilize the activity bus at $44,000 per year, and it's no longer in the budget. Yet a new budget has allowed the offering of busing Hinckley students to and from Finlayson Elementary. I just want the Hinckley-Finlayson students that live in the Finlayson area to have the same opportunities that the Hinckley students have. If it's really due to low numbers, I'm proposing using one of the school's Suburbans to transport the Finlayson students to FES, so Finlayson parents can pick up their children at the school like Hinckley parents do in Hinckley. I understand that no other schools in the area have an activity bus, as I was told at the fall sports meeting, but no other schools in the area have 2 elementary schools in the same district either. I know Finlayson used to be included and the school utilized for students in extracurricular activities in the past. It seems Hinckley-Finlayson wants to bus students to FES for good education, but not for extracurricular activities. To end, I'd like to say if Hinckley-Finlayson wants parents to choose their school over others, they would need to make accommodations for those families that live farther away. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly. Would anybody else like to speak during open forum? Yes, George.
All I wanted to say, can we do something with the trees out in front here again? They're all scraping on the buses. I think Sarah might have talked to Joe about it, but I just thought I'd mention it.
I'll check with Joe on that tomorrow.
Yeah, whatever, just, we want buses to stay kind of nice.
Were those ones, going down the hill towards the garage, are they still?
It helped a lot. They could be turned back some more, but it helped a lot.
There's a number of them on some of the streets that you travel, that the city needs to trim.
Mm-hmm.
Across from
And-
Ostrand's old house.
There, and even the city on 48 is not good either. You kinda gotta stay towards the center. I don't know if you got anything to say about that, Dave, or not.
Right, no.
But even, you know.
But I'll pass it on.
But past Alyssa and Bussey's there, I don't know how far the school owns where the pine trees are, them kind of stick out, I don't know if that's school property or not. You know, I don't know where the lines are. But it's better than what it was.
So George, Brian wrote it down, he'll look into it
Yeah.
and see what we can do.
I just thought I'd mention it, you know, so.
Sure, thank you. I'm gonna go back up. We did, a motion and a second to approve adding the activity bus discussion, but we didn't actually do an agenda approval after adding the motion, or the, activity bus discussion. So we need to go back and, I need a motion to approve the agenda. I'll make the motion to approve it.
I'll second that.
So there's a motion and a second, is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, let's go back down to consent agenda. The next item is the consent agenda. Does anyone need anything pulled from the consent agenda and placed later in the agenda?
There was a few corrections in the agenda. Number 21, we had to fix the range. It was typed in at the wrong range, so that's been corrected in number 21 and in the hiring letter. And then we just updated some dates for a resignation and a request for leave.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Next up is bills. If you have a question on the bills, please state the page number and the bill number. Does anybody have any questions on the bills? If not, I will need a motion to pay the bills.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
You- There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up are our reports, and up first is ICS.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to start?
Sure. Hey, I'm Jeff Schultz with ICS. Been working with the school district for about 24 years now on various projects throughout that history. So very familiar with projects from the Finlayson Elementary School to the Hinckley Elementary School to this facility as well. I'm excited for us to be here with you today.
And I'm Lori Christensen with ICS, and I've worked with the district just over the last 4 years with some different projects, and then also just came onto Jeff's team to help him out too. So tonight, over the last few months, there's a few things that were identified as potential facility needs and facility and grounds needs. Just wanted to bring some options to the table as a first glance at it, and then really just here to present. So I don't know if there'd be much discussion on this, Brian, but just more so just informational on what the facility committee has explored and some of the needs that have been identified. So for our agenda, we'll review those items that were identified. We did put some budgets together based on a solution, so that doesn't mean it's the only solution, but it's just to start getting the idea of what potentially these improvements would cost. And then we look at a path forward if the board is looking to explore it even further. So far, the identified needs that the district had looked at for facility We're gonna review some high school needs with your locker rooms, with changing areas, and then also your showers, to try to get those, more individual showers. The bus maintenance garage, there's some needs there. The Hinckley Elementary School has some needs at the cafeteria media center, along with some safety in the gym. Community daycare options is a need throughout the community. District-wide lighting improvements, and then the Finlayson building improvements that have kind of been out there for a while. And you can stop me at any time if you have questions, but I'll continue to go through these. So the first thing that we had been talking to the district with is the high school locker rooms, the showers. So currently what you have is they're like the gang style showers, so they're the community showers. And they're in need of some replacement, but what ends up happening is you start running into a code compliancy with today's standards. You actually would need to separate, if you did any improvements, you actually need to separate the drain from what may come off of my body to the person next to me. They can't touch each other. So what a lot of districts have been going towards is more individual stalls and shower stalls. So you can see down in that right-hand corner, that would just be a conceptual idea of what you could do with your locker room showers for both the men's and the women's. So we just showed that as a picture, but you can see what your existing showers would look like. That would make them, you would have one ADA compliant shower that's required by code. And this, as we go down to budgets and stuff, it doesn't include renovating your whole locker room, but it would just be the showers in that area. The other thing that was brought to our attention is changing areas and having some areas that if someone would like to change in privacy versus out in public with the rest of the students, they would have that option. So, you know, right now, you can see on the right there a picture of what some districts are doing to have some sort of privacy changing areas. This would be applied for both the girls, the boys and the girls' locker rooms, along with looking at your swimming locker rooms, so your pool area locker rooms. You would have to be required to have an ADA compliant changing room. And then to do this in the existing footprint of your locker rooms, we'd actually have to reconfigure some of the lockers, but we had a plan that would be able to just extend some of the existing lockers to provide enough count. So we included that so you would have a complete project versus solving one problem and then creating a different one. So that is included when you look at the budget. So this is just an example of what your existing. On the very top, you have what the existing shower looks like, and then the proposed on the right of the top there, where you can see there'd be individual shower stalls, and then below you can see the girls changing the existing. There's a room that has some, that's a boys, but yeah, so for the girls, thanks Brian, that's the existing. There's some lockers, I think maybe they call them the varsity maybe, so we'd have to work through a little bit of that. But the lockers in there would come out, and then you can see the proposed potential solution, you'd create those individual changing rooms. Same for the boys would be, there was a room identified that we could use some space and then just relocate those lockers. Any questions on the high school? Okay. Any student questions? Kidding. All right, so the next thing we have that was identified is your current bus garage, maintenance garage, and this is where they do, if they're gonna, any sort of repairs on the buses, any sort of, maybe if they're changing oil or changing a light bulb or something. You currently have just north of the high school here, you do have a one stall. It has a nice office and bathroom and like a conference room, but it only allows for one bus to be in there. So it was identified that having another stall would allow, if you're waiting for a part or if 2 buses needed to be there in there at the same time for any reason, you could do that and still work on 2 buses. So adding another bus maintenance stall was brought to our attention. There's a couple different options that the facility committee explored. Again, I'll just say options because there's nothing set in stone, but, and just I wanna be clear, this isn't a bus garage. Your buses actually park outside across the street from the maintenance shop. So this would be looking at adding 2 stalls. So one of the options is the city does have an existing building. Thank you. So they have a building that was potentially brought up that maybe they'd be willing to sell. And could you put money into that to make it, to heat it and provide those 2 stalls that you're looking for? This is a map you'll see on the right. There we go. That's your existing maintenance garage. Right below it, or to the, I don't know, just right there to the left there, that is where your buses park. And then the city-owned would be right in the same area. And then I just pointed out the high school so you can see the proximity of that. So that was one option that was explored. And as the facility committee looked at that building it's not heated. There's a portion that's heated, but not the whole thing. It would require quite a bit of cost. So we did look at that, putting insulation in there, making sure that you could fit 2 buses inside. And then the bathroom in the office, it's pretty run down, so we'd need to put in some extra costs for that, including updating like the lighting and some fire protection barriers between the heated and unheated. So there was some cost, so we explored that cost. We did not get to the point of actually we didn't include anything that would be to purchase that. I think that would be a conversation with the city. You know, they know that you were thinking about it, but yet that negotiation would have to come after, if that's something you want to explore further. The facility committee then said, well, if we're gonna do that, and they saw the cost, they said, what if we just built on some property that we actually already own, that's right next to the existing maintenance garage? And so we explored that option also, and talked to Joe and the bus drivers and seeing what kind of size of building we would need. So we could have a 2-stall, we'd have a bathroom in there, still utilizing your conference room in the existing maintenance shop, but putting it right there on that same piece of property as your current one. And that would be a 32 by 60 foot new construction. So those are 2 options that we explored, and you'll see at the end, you can see and it was kind of right now to look at a cost comparison, right? Because a lot of times we think, well, if we have a building, that would be a lot less expensive to do that, and maybe we could just do some upgrades. But we just wanted to compare it because you still have an old building versus now you would have a new building and have less maintenance and less things that may come up during construction. The other item that came up was over at your Hinckley Elementary School. The cafeteria currently is in need of more space. It's very tight. It's loud in there. There's some noise issues. And then there's also with your serving lines, the dishwasher and the serving food they're like right next to each other. So some congestion on being able to get kids in and out, especially in the mornings. Bonnie had said that it's very, very congested as kids try to come in, have a quick breakfast, and then get to class. So that, looking at what would be our options to expand that area. So this, if you go to the next slide, this would be, again, conceptual and just a first pass. So this would be expanding that cafeteria in the yellow. You can see that, and that currently there's some storage area. We could expand out beyond that, still keeping in the light green some storage area, and then creating a new storage for your kitchen. The hatched area, you can see, that would be dollars that we would have to reconfigure your your dishwasher line, but by expanding over to the right, that would give us an option to kind of move that line to the other side of your cafeteria, so then those two lines would not interfere with each other. And then also, it was identified at the elementary, the need of having a media center. And so looking at trying to utilize some space that you currently have, but also expanding. And you can see in the blue there, that would be to renovate a current classroom and then build onto that. And so that would be another small expansion in the same area as the cafeteria. You may be able to connect the two. You could, this would take more development, but this is just a very high level idea of what you possibly could do. And then on the far right there in the purple, that is relocating that classroom that we're gonna renovate to where your current computer lab is. And then the computers would then be moved into your media center. And that would be creating, space for the students at the elementary that they don't currently have. You also, in your elementary, this is your gym, and there's a stage. This is very typical construction of older gymnasiums. And no longer does your stage actually, that curtain doesn't open, it doesn't need to be open. There's some band practice behind there. And so it was brought, we don't need that, and the bricks that are along there are a safety hazard to the students. So as they're playing ball and they're doing their activities in the gym, how could we take that, remove that and then create a safer space? And so what that would entail is just removing the bricks completely, putting up a solid wall. Even though there's two noisy spaces, you'd have more sound control between the band and then the gym space. The other option, or the other idea that was brought to our attention was some sort of daycare center within both the Hinckley and Finlayson areas. And so in the Hinckley, looking at potentially constructing a new, there isn't, on your elementary site or your high school, you don't really have a lot of space to expand from those schools. So just constructing something new, which would give you about 3 classrooms, it would be about a 5,000 square foot building. And you do have a piece of property just east of your elementary school, right there, yep. And that could potentially, I know the buses already come down there and turn around, and so that would be a spot that you could have a nice new building. You could have a little bit of playground, but you could also utilize some of the existing elementary playgrounds too, and providing that service to the community. Also then in Finlayson, that's another area, is like, okay, how do we provide the same service for that area? And actually looking at, we'd have to dig into this deeper, but there could be some options in your existing facility that maybe we could create a classroom and turn it into a daycare. So that is still being explored, but if you're interested, that would be something we'd want to meet with the principals and the users and see how that building is being utilized today. District-wide, looking at doing a lighting improvement, converting all your lights to LED lights. I think this is something that you guys have been discussing before, and there was a study done on what that would look like, and being able to potentially even use energy savings funds to fund this project and have a more efficient building. And we looked at all 3 of your facilities to have these improvements.
Your new additions already have all LEDs, so it's really standardizing the rest of the district into the efficiency lighting.
And then recently too, we've been looking at the Finlayson Elementary School needs. Back in 2016, when you looked at facility needs improvements, there were things identified, but I know you have to prioritize, you have to address the most important things first. And so there were, some things that were still needed but didn't quite make the top of the priorities, and looking at a little bit deeper on what as a school board, what you guys want to do to continue to invest in that facility and make sure that you have a good learning and working environment for students and staff. And so that, we don't have it identified exactly what that would be, but just kind of knowing that there's some needs in that building. Even you currently have steam boilers, you know, it was identified, should we get those converted over to hot water for a better heating system? So that is what we were asked to look at so far. I'm not saying it's all extensive of everything, but that's what we were asked to look at. Any questions on that, or I'll move into budgets? Yes.
Was it ever discussed about, could we even add a 2-stall garage onto our existing bus garage? Was that talked about, or no?
We did talk about that, and currently you do have, I think it's the DNR that rents the back piece of your building. And so that's gonna, you know, it seems like they were gonna wanted to continue to do that. And then if you look at your roof line, and you can get one bus in here, but then if you were to connect it, your roof line would not match up to connect, or to build another one. So we'd have to tear down the whole front of that building and reconstruct it. So we did look at that.
Oh,
Yep. Good question, very good.
And then I do have a question with regard to the elementary school project proposed. Would that build out into any of the playground area?
No, so it goes into the kind of the courtyard between the two wings. There's a lot of extensive time spent on looking at all the different options, adding on, and which would be much more expensive. This is a very small additions because we're really trying to use the space you have more wisely. Spend a lot of time with your principal getting feedback and thoughts on it to try to keep the costs down, and yet make sure we're not losing a classroom as part of it, making sure it's a courtyard between the two, kind of where the deliveries are coming into the school as well.
Good question.
So this is taking over an existing classroom?
It currently is.
It would
yes.
be taking like Elena Williams' classroom and moving her down to where the computer lab is, putting the computer lab into the media center is kind of what we had talked about. So it's just kind of shifting around. You know, one of the concerns is that computer lab does not have a window, so what would we do there? A windowless classroom is not very appealing. So, I mean, some dilemmas to look through, but that's.
You know,
And there's no way of putting a window, right? No, because that's an interior.
Yeah, that one's an interior. You know, we could look at, do you build another classroom at the end of a hallway somewhere potentially, so you continue to have daylight, but you would still have that other space to do something in. And some of that's just cost, you know, based on cost, if that's the direction you want to go. But with this courtyard, you can see we worked really hard that we try to minimize, and we had this discussion, is minimize any daylighting that we're taking away. It actually will bring the cafeteria more daylight, but you know, not just trying to infill that whole area because of the daylighting. Okay, so we did some preliminary budgets. I just want to make sure that they're not bids, so we didn't go out and get contractor bids. We use what we have, our expertise in the industry, along with industry standards and what we've been seeing today as far as costs. We're not trying to be the low bidder, we're not trying to be the high bidder. We're trying to really come up with budgets that you, on bid day, would then be able to afford the project. So just keep that in mind. We also have an all-in project cost, and what I mean by that is you have your contractor costs, but then you're gonna have permits, you're gonna have fees for engineering and architectural fees, you're gonna have contingency for things that come up during construction. We do have an inflation in there because we know you're not gonna bid it today, so we work in some inflation for you know, a year from now. And then there's some testing and surveys and standard general conditions that all projects require. So here is, hard to zoom in. So here is just the list of all the projects and what they came in on for costs based on, you know, the proposed solution. Again, not the only solution, but that was based on what the facility committee had come up with as options. And then you can see the bus garage, I had 2 different costs there. And you can see on the far right, I did totals based on if it was a new maintenance garage or repurpose the city. So you can see those 2 comparisons. Oddly, they came in really close. And Brian, or the facility committee, last time we met, we talked about the square footage that we originally had was a little more than we needed because we're gonna use that conference room and the office in the existing building. So then we worked with Joe on having more of the appropriate size bus garage based on what their input was. So that ended up, that's how that number is just a little different because it ended up coming down in cost because that footprint's a little bit smaller. But you wouldn't have to buy any property, you know, so that's kind of the difference too. And you can see the cafeteria, the gym, the Hinckley Elementary School, removing that brick, what that costs. With Finlayson, the board, if they want to explore it further, we'd have to do another prioritization and really understand where you want to go with that building. So I don't have a cost because I'm not sure what you guys want to really do there. And then the district-wide, again, I could put a cost to the new building for a daycare in Hinckley. Your daycare at the Finlayson will have to just figure out what space we can use and then what we need to do to bring it up to code to have a daycare. So, any questions on the budget?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On that daycare center in Hinckley, so you're at 2.3 million, 5,000 square foot building.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming slab on grade foundation.
Yep.
9-foot sidewalls, probably.
I would say 9-foot ceilings maybe, so a little bit higher, yep.
Well, my husband's in construction, and to me, that just seems excessive for that size building.
Okay, and yeah, I guess depending on, you know, the finishes that we're looking at for daycare, the bathrooms, and what we need inside. We also have a playground in there, and then we also have parking lot that would be included in that, and utilities. So depending on what we need for utilities. So it's not just your building.
No, yeah, and
Okay.
I understand that, but I'm still thinking, even with the parking lot, and I don't know what type of playground equipment, you know, you're predicting or budgeting for, especially since the Hinckley Elementary playground is right across the street. To me, it seems excessive.
And we can explore that further too, based on what we need, yeah. Unfortunately, costs are, like now, I mean, we're trying to be realistic on what we're seeing in the commercial industry.
We're really applying kind of a normal school construction cost per square foot that we're seeing today. We're seeing up to 400, I think, I don't know exactly how far it
I was
is a
just
square foot on there.
Yeah.
Cost per square foot for construction. You're maybe right that it doesn't need to be the highest level of school construction, so it could likely be a lot less, depending on how we design it and all of those types of things.
Because I'm just thinking if this was bid out, 2.3 million, I think our big contractor in Pine County would be knocking down our door to get that bid
Well,
for that size
yeah, so it
building.
might be a lot less than two if the contractors are so hungry. But again, they don't get the whole amount, they get, that's the lowest bid, that's, you know, our
Yeah.
job is to help design it with you and put it out to competitive bid and then oversee the work and make sure it's done right and well and following bid laws and state plan review and those types of things. If it comes in a lot lower, it's your dollars, right, to work with other projects or other things.
I have a couple questions. The lighting efficiency, so do we get a discount by doing all of it at once, or we can't chip away at it? I know Joe's not here, but
That's a great question. Yeah, so I can help answer some of that one. One of the things that, school district, you have to go with a competitive bid, right? So if you bid a section of lights, you might get this type of bulb, or this type of fixture, right? And so Joe's got this Phillips lighting over here. And then next project, you bid it out and you get Sylvania over here. And then you get this type of fixture. Well, then you've got a zillion types of fixtures you're trying to maintain in the maintenance shop. So a lot of school districts try to standardize, put it all together in one package. And then you standardize it across the district where you have all the same. We have the same lighting controls, we have the same light bulbs, we have the same light fixtures. And at the same time, you start getting the energy savings all at one time. So, and then you can measure the energy savings to make sure you're getting the savings that you're expecting to get, as well as you get utility rebates. So the utility companies are giving significant rebates for lighting projects these days. So, but you could continue to chip away and do a little bit at a time. And I know Joe, as fixtures go out, he does change them and put more energy efficient. But then you end up with a really bright one here and different colorations in the classrooms as well.
And my next question is, Finlayson Elementary, if there's needs and there's prioritized needs at Finlayson, why don't we have a number for the cost?
We had brought up, at the very last facilities meeting, Finlayson things, hadn't really broken down what those projects were or what a daycare would look like.
Because what if those needs are higher prioritized than something that's on this list? I guess I would like to see the needs of the district as a whole, not just what we have on the sheet.
And Jody, that's a great question too, because what, the facility committee had been going down this path and seeing some needs. I think they wanted to see if the board is kind of in alignment with that, if we should continue to go down and continue to look at needs.
Yeah.
Because
And for a lot of us, this is the first time we've seen any of this.
Right.
To be honest.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly, so, and Brian, you can fill in too if you want, but just kind of, that's, the next slide would be a path forward if you're in, if you want to continue to explore this.
Other than Dave and Leo, for the other 5, they've seen the updates, but this is the first time hearing the details. So yeah, just kind of wondering, keep going forward, or, some idea, we could have a work session to talk about it more. That's a lot of information all of a sudden at once. We could have Joe here to go through more specifics with Finlayson needs. Just kind of trying to get a feeling of what the kind of will of the board is for next steps. Keep moving forward, piecemeal some things, do them in small, just kind of what we'd like to see as far as the next steps.
One of the, if I can throw this in, it was sort of in our last meeting, kind of Lori's brainstorm. We've been talking about only 3 kids in that kindergarten in Finlayson. Maybe that's changed a little bit, but it's real small. If there's a daycare there and extra rooms, and it could be modeled fairly cheap, you have a daycare there, maybe someone will bring their infant as well as their student to the elementary. So maybe it would help some attendance that way. And when we say daycare, we're not talking about, from what I'm understanding, is we're not providing a daycare free. Their parents are paying for it. So there's costs on comparisons to other daycares, but everybody's full. So that's down the road to find out what it costs to operate one and set the fees so that they'll repay the debt and the staffing. It would be like individual business accountable that way. So it's not a burden to the school. It's actually would help. It helps economics locally, which brings in more tax money, which brings in more students and teacher retention. It's a good thing for that. So that's kind of what we've been discussing, I guess.
And right when we met, I believe Finlayson daycare had just recently closed, so it was
Yeah.
also a need in the current community of Finlayson that a daycare had closed. Would this be a way to maybe help with that need?
So that's why the Finlayson daycare thing is sort of behind on planning and costing and things like that, if there is going.
I think if you, it's kind of interesting to see how all this evolved, right? It was, the city's got a building for sale. Would it fit us, our needs in the build, you know, the bus maintenance, right? But if we're looking at that, can we revisit this lighting project we've been trying to, it's been on the list for a long time. About the needs at the elementary school and some of the challenges over there. If we're coming into town, can you guys come look at this too? And really continue to explore some of the different items that you see on the list. And this kind of, you know, it's been a series of meetings over and over. And I think your building committee isn't trying to type, here's your list and here's our projects that we want to do. I think it's a little bit bringing you along as far as here's what we've been talking about. Do you want to continue? We continue to explore these, we continue as a board to prioritize some of this, bring it to the community, we look at funding options that we have in front of us, or not, right? And I think that's gonna be the
I guess for me, it's, so you said you oversee and make sure it's done correctly. We have projects that were not done to a new facility standard. So that's my worry going forward is I want our buildings to look like they're brand new, not like they're piecemeal. And that we shouldn't have to come back to you after 6 months and something's wrong. I'm
Well, not
struggling
only
going
that-
forward with this, with stuff that's happened in the last few years, or how things have been finished in the last few years.
And I would say not only things that have gone wrong, but things that haven't been warranted. And I
Right,
think that's
Yes.
a concern of mine also, going out and working with you guys again, is we do have projects that had things done that, like Angela said, but it's like, just figure it out as a district. And I think we've asked a lot of questions the last 4 years since we added on to this school. Some of the things that were done, that there was no warranty, or, oh, that's just the way it looks. But I don't think that's right. So that would be a concern of mine also. And we have one going on right now at the Vision Center. So,
Can you guys explain what's going on there, that, why it's not covered under warranty? The flooring and glue?
Yeah, yep, so I don't know if I'd say, Leo, it's not covered under warranty, but they did experience a very high level of moisture in that concrete recently, once the building was occupied. And, I mean, just an unforeseen condition, that, you know, we had plumbing trenches in there and they were laying piping and there was no sign of water. So, and that was an existing slab that had existing LVT on it for years, and there was no sign of that. So it wasn't something that would be obvious that this would happen with this glue or with this product, but for some reason that slab has a lot of water content. So right now they're looking at what is the solution on how to address that. And if it's the actual product itself, they would warranty. But the thing is that's not necessarily, just putting on new LVT won't solve the problem. It would actually, you know, we want to solve the problem so that it doesn't continue to happen. So that's where they're exploring, you know, not just putting in new warranted flooring in there. So do they put in some pits? Do they put in
An
something
update
to?
they came up with on that building over the weekend, or since Friday afternoon, was we're gonna look at the, I'm gonna try to say my words correctly, the dehumidification, the way they do the hot and the cold in the building.
Yep.
To see if that takes out some of that humidity from the flooring. They just did that starting today, so we're kind of in a wait and see if that solves the problem. Otherwise, they've talked about some pumping and things like that, but
Yeah.
they're hopeful that, you know, by changing the hot air, cold air, and getting the humidity out of there, that helps solve the problem with the flooring. And that came out Friday afternoon.
we're, you know, we can't promise that things aren't gonna arise during projects or even with 6 months. I mean, most projects have at least a year that you do a warranty period. Because things come out with the different seasons, with the different occupancies. And I know Justin and Mark on our team, they've been over there working with them. So whatever we can do to help identify a solution and get that implemented. You know, that's one of the services we provide, that we'll be there to help solve things that do come up.
But not monetary.
Well,
That
if it's
comes
some,
back to us
We were
having
told
to
it would come
fix.
out of general fund. The SCRED
But
general
you're
fund.
there to help us, but ultimately, it's the taxpayers' dollars that are.
depending on what the problem is, like if it's something that we did wrong or that was engineered wrong, then, you know, then that does sometimes get picked up by the designers. But if it's a condition that was unforeseen, you know, then that would be something that would have had to be put in no matter what. So then I call it a value added to your building and would be needed no matter what.
So would that be considered like a change order then?
Yep.
Because I consider a change order may be different than something that was laid down, that was said it would work on the slab that doesn't. But now I feel like it's come back to us like it's our problem and our cost to fix. That's how I understood what SCRED is telling us.
Okay. And we can look at the details of that, but I wanna say with that flooring, the flooring itself, the supplier is like, yes, we can warranty that flooring. But if there is to take the moisture out of the concrete, that would not be the flooring contractor's responsibility, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
And the flooring isn't new, it's the same flooring that's been there for. as
No,
long
this
as
is new.
Oh, it is?
This is new,
Oh, it is.
yeah.
Okay.
This is new stuff.
Thought this was part of the existing.
It's just, there's been an issue with every project, since I've been on the board, with every project we've had, there's been something in the end that has not been right, or not been fixed, or not been, and it's always financially, partially put back on us. So I guess going forward, I want there to be, you guys have a stake in the game too. It's gonna come out of your pocket and our pocket, like, I just.
Yeah, and if board members, I'd really appreciate if you got some of those history things that were
It's
wrong.
been brought up before, you know it has, you've been in meetings with us before.
Yeah, well, the one
Well,
that I'm aware of
don't-
is the parking lot.
Sorry, I'm not-
The parking lot's one that I'm aware of. Are there others other than the parking lot?
The walking track, all of the seams in the new building, Mandy, do you have any?
Shot clocks that are, right, that we have to pay for?
See, I'm not aware of those at
Yeah.
all. No, I'm honest,
Okay.
I'm being honest with you.
Okay,
I'm not aware of what is it, shot
we'll
clock?
make a list
I
and
was
we can
gonna
send it to
say.
you.
Yeah,
We
the
can
shot
make a
clocks
list
are
and
not
send it to you.
compatible with their scoreboard that were installed by whoever installed them. So we have to, Minnesota State High School League is requiring us to have shot clocks, so we had to order new shot clocks for that new gym.
Okay. And then some seams on the walking track?
All the new addition, it's not just the walking track,
Where like the concrete
where the walls meet.
walls kind of meet.
And you
It
told
looks
us
like
that-
it's been
where they
glued
meet.
together.
Yes, you said that that's an expansion point, they shouldn't come, you should look.
There's places you can see daylight through it.
Yeah,
Well, even by the stairwell.
by the stairwell, you can see outside, like,
Isn't there water leaking too in that
Yes,
stairwell?
down in that same spot where you can see outside.
I will look into these things. I was not aware of those, honestly.
I think maybe we could get a list together to Brian and Brian
Yep.
could.
Yep, I can do that.
Does anybody have any other questions regarding this for ICS or for our facilities committee?
I'm
Do
sorry.
we want to? oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, which room in the proposal for the elementary school does not have any windows?
it'd be where the computer lab behind you, Toby, the perfect one.
Yeah, so where it says convert computer lab, that's the one that doesn't have any windows.
No outside wall on that?
Yep.
room?
There's a hallway that goes down to the other, the stride room.
Okay.
And then my next question would be, do you guys wanna do a work session to, go over what has been proposed?
I think I definitely would like to discuss before moving forward.
Can we also include in that of finding out the needs of Finlayson Elementary as well, so that we can prioritize those with all of the information that we can have?
How long would that take to do the Finlayson evaluation?
With budgets?
Or, yeah, just knowing like what the needs are for Finlayson Elementary, so that we have those items, so that we can prioritize correctly, having all the information necessary.
So I would say mid-October we could have something on it.
So then maybe,
The October board
the
meeting,
October board meeting is when, I don't have a calendar.
October board meeting is October.
10?
Yes.
So,
Maybe we could set dates then for later that month.
so next month then bring calendars with, so we know when we can do a work session after October's board meeting. And then we'll have the numbers for Finlayson. All right, well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you guys.
Next up is superintendent's report. Brian.
Reminder that this Wednesday, in 2 days, we're gonna have new staff coffee here. I'll have some treats with our new staff, just informal, kind of meet and greet, get to know them, they get to know you. But that'll be here 3:30 in the boardroom. Conferences, hard to kind of believe, but coming very quickly are the high school conferences for the first quarter, which are October 6th and 10th. As of right now, we're planning to have those in person. The Hinckley and Finlayson Elementaries are November 17th and 21st. Board members have had a past practice of coming to those. You're certainly invited, welcome to attend. Just kind of letting your principals know that you want to come, and we can get you signed up for that if you're interested in that. Also early to talk about, but we'll just bring it up for the first time. We're gonna have our 17th annual staff breakfast, which is the last day before we leave for the holiday vacation on Thursday, December 22nd. So just for new board members, typically the board and administrators show up. We have a hot breakfast for staff, coffee, juice. There's some small presents, gifts that are awarded for sometimes best holiday outfit, and most holiday spirits. So that's typically at the high school. We usually show up about 5 to 7. We stay until the bus drivers come, and usually we bring food up to Finlayson. So just to put that on your radar, I will bring up more of a sign-up sheet next month. It's no money that comes out of district funds. Typically that's board and admin cover that cost. So next, wondering if the school board would like to look at these dates for MSBA training. We've been talking about it since about the end of the school year. Wondering if any of these dates would work here in the end of September or early October for MSBA training, or would you like me to go back to MSBA and see if there's some dates later, or option 3, do we want to stop talking about it and maybe look at it for next summer? So I guess I'd like
I
some.
would not like to stop talking about it.
Okay.
I think it would benefit the board since there's so many new, so that would be my only suggestion.
Yeah, for me, just the 22nd is the only day that would not work, but any of those other 4 would be good for me.
They told me when we were talking early summer, it's about a 3-hour training. They were thinking 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, for a start. And so you're kind of what you're looking at for time frame.
The only days that I can't do either September 28th or 29th because I will be on vacation. So the other dates I can, as long as it's after 5, well, or 6, but I can switch things around. But the 28th and 29th, I definitely cannot do.
Sounds like we're down to October 5th and 12th of these dates.
The only date that would work for me at this time is September 22nd. I don't have my October schedule yet, so
Toby.
sorry.
So we'll go back and get some more dates.
But,
Or,
I mean, once I get my October schedule, it's not to say that the 5th or the 12th wouldn't work. I would just have to need to see my schedule first
When do you get that, Toby?
on the 18th of September.
end of this week, early next week. Would October 5th or 12th work for,
12th would work for sure for me, possibly the 5th.
I can make sure.
do you want to let me know on Sunday, and
Yeah, I'll do that.
then I'll put it in an update once I know for the rest of you.
Thank you.
And lastly, and I apologize for the short notice, Mrs. Tracy Johnson came to me today, and she knew that I had some history with how the board approves these trips, so she apologized to Ms. Hinckley for not bringing it to her. But she came to me, and this is the information I left in your spot. I put it on there as discussion or action item. Ultimately, at some point, we're gonna need school board action to approve the Ecuador trip, because it is traveling with students out of state. I gave you kind of the itinerary in the plan. It's about a 15-day trip for our generally Spanish 3 and Spanish 4 students. We leave it to Spanish 3 and Spanish 4 just because they've had more training in the language, so they'll have more comfortability when they're in the overseas. So we do this trip with Mora. Mora and their school board have approved it. Again, I know it's very short notice. We can certainly discuss it, or the school board can take action on it tonight if you feel comfortable doing that. But Mrs. Johnson would kind of like to get forward with planning and moving this trip. We typically do a trip like this every other year with the Spanish program, just like the German program does.
What's our cost on that?
It is spendy. It is.
No, I mean for the school.
We pay for the chef, for Mrs. Johnson to go, otherwise the
Okay.
kids cover their costs.
And any busing or more covers that?
I believe Mora covers the busing down to the airport.
So it's minimal.
It's very minimal.
So this is not during school time?
Yep. The itinerary dates are June 14 to June 29.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the Spanish trip, that would hinder us from making, an action out of it tonight?
Are there any travel advisories for any part of the country that is on the itinerary?
Not that we know of right now. We're also trying to follow what their COVID policies are, but no advisories right now that, to prevent us from going there.
And we've dealt with that, Toby, for the past 3 years on our trips.
Correct.
They've told us ahead of time what everything was, correct?
Yep. I mean, it was really bad, obviously, in 2020 when COVID first started, but they've continued, as we've done the German trip a couple times since then, give us those advisories or what we can expect as we get overseas.
Okay, I just did a Google search and it just says Ecuador level 2 exercise, increased caution. I don't know what parts of the country that would apply to, or if it's the whole country, but
But even if we approve it now and something arises like that, I mean, things can get shifted
The only
around.
hard part for canceling is once the tickets are, getting the deposits back once tickets are purchased, which they typically, according to what Ms. Johnson put on here, we don't do that until February, so maybe we'd have more information before we purchase those tickets.
And do the students, they're aware before the tickets are purchased, so they
Yep,
can?
so what you have is what they'd get, and she has in here, after airline tickets are purchased, payments are non-refundable. Otherwise, you would get 100% of your payments back up until that point.
If we approve it tonight, that gives her more planning time and the kids more planning time. Because they want the first payment by September 3rd.
And she does know that if the board wanted more
Right.
information that may have to be pushed back, she ideally would like to start planning as quickly as she can.
I would make the motion to approve
the Ecuador trip.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the trip. Does anybody have any more discussion?
So the thought will be that parents will just use their own best judgment if they wanna send their child on that trip, you know, with that level 2, just exercise increased caution. It's 1 through 4, scale of 1 to 4. 2 is exercise increased caution, 3 is reconsider travel, and 4 is do not travel. And then 1 is exercise normal precautions. I would be okay with approving this, just as long as, you know, obviously, I hope the parents will use their best judgment with their
And I
child.
think that's what we ran into last year when we went to Germany.
Okay.
I mean,
That we did.
the parent,
And kids, it's not required to go, parents have that option, and we get them as much information as we can on any travel advisory.
That sounds good.
alright, so, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Next up is high school principal report. Kim?
Good evening, everybody. We had a really great workshop week. Orientation and open house was well attended. Just some things that were implemented this year. We have our 7th through 11th grade math teachers piloting CPM for math, just looking at a new way of doing math. And if you walk into classrooms, it's really great. It's more of a cooperative learning type of style of teaching math, so kids are engaged, there's whiteboards on the board, kids are working together on math problems, working together. It's a pretty neat program, and so far the teachers have been really excited about the new way of doing math. So they're doing that in there. 7th through and the 8th grade English teachers attended Amplify training during workshop week, as well as 7th grade science did their life science training. And then our instructional leadership team met during workshop week and talked about some building goals we had at the high school. And so from there, we came up with 4 initial goals, which we brought to our entire school during PLCs last week. So our initial building goals for the school year would be to streamline and build processes so that all staff and administration can be consistent and efficient around discipline and behavior. Our second goal is 100% of staff implementing the new SEL curriculum that our KBC team worked really hard on, creating a schedule and curriculum for teachers to use during advisory. Our third goal would be to identification and implementation of a new math curriculum for next year. And then the last one would be increase student achievement through the development and implementation of an MTSS process. So our next steps is our instructional leadership team meets again tomorrow, and we'll talk about the feedback we got from staff last week and take a look at those 4 goals and either tweak them based on feedback and then talk about how we're going to be measuring those goals. So next board meeting, I'll talk about kind of our next steps and where we're going to go and how we're going to be measuring our goals at the high school this year. PLC plans, we kind of tweaked how we're doing PLCs at the high school this year and trying to, again, streamline processes and make things efficient for teachers, less meetings, and to really focus on student achievement during that PLC time. So our PLC times on Wednesdays will involve professional development, which is based on our building goals, student need, teacher support, and then what the PD team comes up with. We will also be having grade level meetings during that time, so we're all meeting together in the media center, so teachers that are working on different teams can meet together and talk about student data and developing interventions. We're also going to be looking at school-wide and grade level data and having data-driven discussions, and then also having time for department planning time, so that's kind of what our PLCs are looking at. Staffing, we are still looking for 1 more DCD program para, and then since this was sent to you, we did post for a 0.5 teacher for our Empowered Learning Center. We have quite a long waiting list, and so we're looking to hire a 0.5 so that we can have more students enter that program. First week of school, I'll have Ari and Jordan kind of share some updates from students around our first week of school, but from my perspective as well as what I've heard from staff, it was a great first week. I was very, very happy with how everything went. Student, staff, everything was just a great first week. Homecoming is coming the week of October 10th. I attached the most up-to-date class sizes just a few hours ago, so you could go ahead and look at that updated list. Last time I looked, there was 4 or 5 classes at the 30 mark, but other than that, everything is well under 30. So you can go ahead and look at class sizes.
whenever you'd like, and I can update that as we kind of go, but those should be pretty steady as of right now. And then there on the agenda too is just some dates to be aware of for coming up events. And last, I will turn it over to Jordan and Ari to kind of share from their perspective of what they're hearing from students around the first week of school.
Okay, I'll start off. So students are like usually feeling traditional school feelings and just, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm at school, I just feel like kind of negative. Obviously, I've been going to school for a while. So it's just, like I get tired. So that was the first week for me. Yeah, so it's just a lot going on. So there were some schedule issues in the building, but that's not uncommon. That has happened every year that I've gone here, or I'm sure any other high school. So that led for some like different people in classes, or there was a point where like my classes weren't right. So it just going through that and not being registered for college classes, which was kind of time consuming, and it got a little frustrating, but after everything is getting figured out, mostly to the end of last week and this week as well. So that should be solved, and it's not, and if it's not already solved, it will be very quickly. So I'll just give a sports update for cross country. Tomorrow we have our meet at Mora. We ran our meet at Pine. So girls cross country, I don't really know much about any other sports. So we placed third at Pine, then Pine Invitational, and that puts us in a great spot for a lot of improvements looking forward. I know that we're looking for a lot in our 1 through 5 runners this year, and we're looking forward to Mora, which we'll see how we'll place Mora in kind of sections.
And then, you know, like Ari said, there was some miscommunication, but the teachers have been working very hard to get through that. And then with football, we've been doing very well. Coming off 2 wins, hoping for our first home game to go well. And then another point, clubs have started this week. There was an MHS meeting, a NASA meeting. School trips have been talked about, the DC trip, and it looked like there was going to be good attendance based off today's first meeting. So those are some positives getting into our second week.
Any questions?
Thank you, Kim, thank you, Ari and Jordan. We will move on to elementary principal, Bonnie.
Hello. As you can see, enrollment numbers are listed there. That was as of 7th, and they've probably changed about 65 times since then. I know we enrolled 2 more today.
5 more waiting still is what I heard last.
Yes, so I mean, it's always changing. I think our biggest class size in Hinckley is 26 possibly. Again, always changing, just trying to figure out that balance when new kids come in of that chemistry in the classroom, how to keep a balance between boys and girls, just a lot of logistics there, but again, it's ever changing. Finlayson had a couple more drops. We worked super hard with Finlayson's schedule, workshop week, to figure out how to implement Amplify. That's our biggest thing. With year 1, it doesn't sound, when we sat through the training of Amplify, that combining grade levels in Amplify is the route we want to travel. So we've had to rearrange schedules, combine classes for Phi Ed, and Ann Riles is teaching a couple core classes for Amplify, and she did great when she was in Hinckley to start with. So I'm not concerned about that. It's just moving forward, if those numbers are to grow, how we address that. I think we are down to 3 first graders as of today, and 4 kindergartners in Finlayson. The rest of the numbers are fairly steady. So again, always a concern moving forward. Summer school, you can kind of see the review there. Since we've changed it up to more of a project-based learning environment, we have gotten almost 80 kids every year, so that's been a good turnout. We did combine grades 3 and 4 as well as 5 and 6 together, and again, that went fairly well. Workshop week, as Kim talked about, our workshop week went very, very well. We spent Tuesday of workshop week, all day training on Amplify. We have 6th grade math doing CPM with the high school, we have 5th grade math doing bridges, we have 2 1st grade teachers also piloting bridges, so they got time to just dig in and get dirty with their curriculum. There's a lot to learn with Amplify, so that's what we will be spending a lot of our time in our PLCs, just collaborating with one another, talking, making sure we're implementing Amplify with fidelity. First week of school was great. It's good to see everyone back. As Ari talked about, the schedule changes and whatnot, just bringing in new kids. I know we had a 1st grader start the very first day of school and our teacher had no notice. So just trying to support teachers and staff as they get these kids thrown at them, as they're already building routines with their kids in class to keep them onboarded. So really great to see them back in class. We already have 4th, 5th, and 6th are done with their fall testing, so we can start grouping them into title access groups, into WIN groups, what we are going to do with it, WIN groups. So we're rolling right along. We are doing a couple different fundraisers, as you can see on the bottom of that list. Wolf Ridge has now gone up to $274 per student, where it was $249 last year. So just trying to find different opportunities for kids to raise that money so they are able to go on that. We are doing charity fundraising this year versus Club's Choice. We get a little bit better kickback, and we're going to be selling candy bars twice. One will be school-wide and one will be our crossing guards like they did last year. So we're off to a good start. Picture day in Finlayson tomorrow. If anybody wants to stop in and take this.
Question for you, Glenn.
Yeah.
So how did the first week of school go then in Finlayson for the combined kindergarten, 1st and 2nd?
I talked to Rita and Shayna. It went better than they expected. I have not touched base with it. I emailed all the staff. I just haven't got a response from Ann. She's doing 2nd grade reading and 3rd grade reading, so it's along with STEM and finance. So I can imagine hers is more of a task demand. I'm gonna go up Thursday and touch base with them. Everything I've heard from them, it went well. But I'll probably be able to read some facial expressions a little bit more different than maybe an email.
Because you said there's 4 kindergartners.
4 kindergartners and now 3 1st graders. We had one drop last week, and the conversations I'm hearing were more about transportation. I believe our board policy is that we can go 4 miles, 2 miles outside our district, and I think that's where we're running into that wall of what we can and can't transport. So it may be something we want to revisit at some time. I think Brian and Sarah have already been talking, so.
Yeah,
They were open and enrolled anyway, but.
Because don't other districts come a lot farther?
They
into
right through our district.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jordan probably honks at them.
East Central's over there.
Yeah.
But the current policy does say 2 miles, or.
It would be.
There's
it
a
would
number,
be-
it's
it says
identified
this-
stops.
It has the stops, but it also says the superintendent and transportation director can look at it on a case-by-case basis. Sarah and I if it's the same student Bonnie's talking about, Sarah and I did start talking about that. If it's the same family, they live in Asco. We used to have busing there. Years ago, it sounded like the informal rule was we needed to have 10 kids to make that worth it. At the same point, how do you get to 10 kids if you don't have transportation there at all? If they don't know we have transportation there? So she and I are talking, we're also gonna talk about another student that from Finlayson area that we heard may be outside those lines, and can we do something different? So there's a little flexibility in the policy, but it kind of where they are outside those lines.
Can I say one thing though, right? Some of these ones that we go out, way out to pick up, they are problem kids that got thrown out of their district, and now we're there's one over that way that we go quite a ways to pick up. And he got thrown out of Pine City, so this may be something we want to look at too.
Does anybody have any other questions for Bonnie? Then we will move on to community ed report.
For this-
Becky is not here.
Becky's not able to make it tonight, so it's gonna be a written report only,
Okay,
and I
just-
can bring back questions if you have them.
If you have questions for Becky,
Let me know.
let Brian know. We're gonna move on to athletics. Andy.
Hi, I'm here. I made it. Had a busy day today. So our football numbers are up from last year. Oh wait, nope, I'm looking at the right one. There were a lot less, not a lot less players last year, but they've come up, and so far we've had two. I wrote this last weekend or the weekend before, so we've won 2 games and played East Central this Friday at home. We have our first home game. There's 48 football players in grades 9 through 12, and so we've had to add a 4th coach, who is Bo Whalen, which you guys are already aware of, and we have 21 7th graders out and 10 8th graders out so far. So a good base coming up from junior high. Our volleyball numbers are solid again, but down from the previous years. They played 4 games so far this season, just like Little River, Crosby, Ironton, Mora, and Pine City. We have won 1 game out of those 4, but they've been very close. There are 34 players in total. Varsity has 14, JV 9, and C team 11. There's been a little fluctuation back and forth. We did not have enough for a 4th coach this year, so Kraft coached until September 2nd. I know that he's still around to kind of help Mallory out, and that was really, really nice to have, especially if we're gonna try to develop a program. He's a really good resource, so it's been really nice that we could have him for that long, even though it'd be really nice if we could have him for the whole season. Just he's got a really good extensive knowledge of that, and since he was our head coach for a long time in the past, he's a really good resource to have. We were going to have some foreign exchange students start, but they chose cheerleading instead. They decided to go that route, which is okay, because that just adds to our cheerleaders. So there are a few more like down in that mark there. Junior high volleyball did have a few optional practices during workshop week, and they had a good turnout for that. So just if kids could come if they wanted to, they just had to have a sports physical. There are 12 players in 7th grade, and 8th grade has 19. And there could possibly be a few more trickling in and out. So far, behavior hasn't been quite the issue. We've had a few kids that we've had to deal with, but last year there was a lot of behavior issues with the junior high kids where we had to split them up in teams and that kind of stuff, and we're hoping that we won't have to do that this year. Cross country, the numbers are down this year, and there's only 26 runners, and that is boys and girls in grades 7 through 12. Do the inclining numbers. Sarah's talking, sorry. We've had that decline in numbers, so Eric Richter, who was our 3rd coach, got demoted, but we are still keeping him around, which I'm really glad about. We're gonna pay him $60 per meet, and I think there's like 8 meets left. So he'll get paid for that at the end of the season, but it's nice to have that extra coach there because there are kids running everywhere, including at practices. I'm sure it was probably a lot easier for the coaches because just where they're kind of at, like, I know I don't have to worry about it as a parent because my kid always has Lyndon running with her because that's just kind of how it is. She's not going to get any better and she's the fastest one on the team. No offense, sorry. But then you have other students that are running in another direction. You got other students running in the other direction, and I kind of wonder if maybe that isn't a safety issue, and that's something that Eric and I actually kind of discussed. So I'm glad that we could keep them on at least for meets, so they have that extra coach there just in case something were to go wrong. This year we have 1 home meet, which is different than the last few years because we did host the GRC meet. Every 2 years it rotates, so this year and next year it'll be in Pine City, and then it will come back to us. All that stuff is set up at the golf course. For cheerleaders, there's a new coach, Nikki Mann. She's graciously taken it on. I think we have 10 or 11 right now with the new foreign exchange ads. That was just like 3 this week that just kind of popped up. They seem really excited about it. The girls are going to travel away games, and at this time 7th and 8th graders are not going to be able to go just because their maturity level isn't quite there with the older girls, and the older girls kind of know the stuff, but we want to include them, so they'll be at the home games. Stacy Klein has agreed to drive them. She has her type 3. They do have the option that they can ride with parents if they're on their way up there, and Nikki and I just need to know ahead of time. I think they all rode with Stacy on Friday when they went to Greenway. I do believe they were in Coleraine, which all of our away games unfortunately are really away. nothing is real close because of the schedule switch, because it flip-flops back and forth. So Stacy and Jenny Masterson have volunteered to help Nikki with those away games because she's not gonna be able to attend them for personal reasons. A goal of mine is actually to look at the participant per coach document and maybe modify it as times have changed, since the document was created. I just think it might be it's a good document to go by, but we should maybe take certain situations into consideration, and I kinda talked about that in my other kind of bullet points. You know, when we're making that decision to get rid of that coach, especially when we already have it budgeted for, because we're really making the decision for the kids that are out there participating, trying new things, and those kids don't always get what the other kids that aren't as successful get, if that kind of makes sense. So, that was just something that maybe later in the year, maybe we can all sit down and maybe take a look at some point. And it was a document that was created in 2006. So just kind of looking at like where that magic number comes from and like what warrants that magic number compared to other magic numbers, that kind of stuff. The fall play is going to be in November, and auditions will be soon for that. Volleyball and cross country have done some fundraising to help their team balances. Cross country again did the Ragnar race that went through Hinckley and Sandstone in August, so they stay up. They had like 4 volunteers, I think, and they stay up all night and greet the runners that come across over by Toby's and then get them moving out. And then volleyball did a cookie dough fundraiser, which I think was pretty successful. With that adrenaline fundraising, which we use in the spring as well. They sell the cards from the businesses. Very good fundraising company. I still plan on involving parents and communicating with the community with Facebook and Remind. Our school registration is going well. It's going better than when August 15th came around and the system kind of sort of crashed and all my kids disappeared out of it and physicals were not right. So that's going a lot better, and there's a back way that I figured out how to help the parents that are having issues with it, so they just give me a call. Shauna Watchman is still taking our sports pictures. Pictures are going to be bought online only, and seniors can do a senior banner, but they're not required to. Most seniors want to do them just kind of like last year. If money's a factor, I help them work that out. They're going to be hung in the gym just like they have been. We've gotten them all back except for volleyball, which we're waiting for the new volleyball uniforms, and then we got them and they were not right, so we were sending them back. And they had to use their old uniforms, so they actually went up to Shauna's studio and took pictures, and they're really fun. They turned out really nice, so I can't wait to see what the finished product looks like. I'm working on scoreboard and video board sponsorships. I was going to get to that at the end of my summer, and then our school happened and that did not happen. I've talked to some businesses, but nothing like set in stone or final. Our Hall of Fame committee is also up and running, and we're making plans on inducting this year's Hall of Fame recipients. There are 12 inductees, and festivities will take place during homecoming week with a dinner on October 15th in the high school cafeteria at like 5 o'clock, and we're still finalizing some of those details. Eric, Richter, and Sam Faber, who are also here, approached me about expanding our weightlifting program to be year-round, and that is something that I'm in favor of, and the kids would have an opportunity to letter 4 different times during the year, so they'd have a fall, winter, spring, and summer, right? Those are our 4 seasons, so. It's been a long day, like I said, and so they have the opportunity to do that. Right now, we don't have the lettering stuff because it's hard to find hardware, so we're still working on something like that for the kids, so they have, you know, their pins that they get for their letterman's jacket, that kind of thing. And then the last thing I have that I just added when they were here and I heard from today that our new shot clocks have been ordered and looking at an arrival date, actually not install date, arrival date of February of 2023. They are out a little bit, but we won't need them until next basketball season, so that's okay. Then we'll work on getting them installed when they get here because there's power that has to go to them and that kind of stuff. So basically what will happen, if those of you that don't know, the ones that were installed in the new gym are not compatible with our scoreboard because it's all super fancy. But after they installed the product, nobody tested it to make sure it worked. So they're like, hey, this turns on. Well, they're double-sided, super fancy. We couldn't get them to turn on, Joe and I couldn't, so we called our rep Brian to come out. Brian crawled up there with the little extension thingy, got up there and realized that they don't turn on because they don't talk to the scoreboard, therefore they don't work. So as far as he knows, we can take those ones that are in that gym, move them to gym number 3, the JAG gym, because we're gonna have practices held in both of those. So boys and girls need to practice the same way, because they flip-flop gyms all the time. Like every day they have a different gym that they're in. And then get the new ones installed in there. So there will be some install that we have to do in that old gym, but I'm not sure what that looks like, and neither does Joe. So other than that, that's kind of all I've got as of right now. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Mandy? Thank you, Mandy. Moving on to board committee reports. Did anybody have any board committees?
The only committee was facilities, which we got a report on.
And communications?
None for me.
Okay. Moving on to budget calendar. Do you have any information, Brian?
I do have some. We are busy going through materials budgets, making sure we're staying within those budgets. There's no new ESSER or GEARS money, which was for technology at this time. The real big part, starting now in September, that will carry us through December, is looking at the levy projections and things like that. Joanne Bruns and I attended a training and a webinar on Friday, and those webinars will continue to happen, and the board will continue to get information starting tonight's meeting all the way through December. But no new kind of budget action items at this time, other than when we get to the levy part.
Does anybody have any questions for Brian? And our action items are the policy approvals.
Yep. This is the second month of these 3 policies: the family medical leave policy, school district system accountability, and workload limits for certain special education teachers. These are required policies by MDE in the state.
Is it okay with everybody to do one vote? So, does anybody have any questions regarding the family and medical leave policy, the school district system accountability, or the workload limits for certain special ed teachers? If not, then I will accept a motion for the 3 policies.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next up is the COVID update.
Just part of, because we received the federal dollars from COVID, we need to continue to meet as the Stay Open Committee, so we did. Looked at CDC changes, recommendations. The real biggest change from the end of last school year to now is still staff or students who test positive can return days 6 through 10 if symptoms are improving and they are fever-free without taking meds. The recommendation is that they would wear a mask days 6 through 10. It is no longer a requirement. Masks are no longer required on school buses. However, per OSHA, staff and students who enter the nurse's office still need to wear a mask. We have updated this on the website with our Safe Learning Plan, which is the requirement of receiving the federal ESSER funds.
Does anybody have any questions for Brian regarding the COVID update? If not, we'll move on to some changes in the support staff handbook.
So after August, and we started putting the final touches together, we had realized that 2 support staff handbooks ago, so the one that would have happened in 2020, had an error that never got corrected, which is number 1. The high school office assistant and the HES office assistant should be placed in range 5 in the old handbook. They were in range 6. All the hiring is appropriate, just the language in the handbook needs to be updated. And the second item is during negotiations, the bus drivers had asked for the ability to split their personal days, half one day, half the other day, just to help with finding subs and things to that nature. So those 2 things we'd like to add to the support staff handbook that you approved last month.
So we're looking for a motion to accept the support staff handbook additions and changes.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Is there a second? I'll second. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next up is, adult meal, breakfast and lunch.
Unfortunately, after the school board approved our adult breakfast and adult lunches, we came out with new requirements where we have to have these as minimums for meal prices for adults. The minimum the state's requiring is for adult breakfast to be $2.25, which is what ours was set at, but adult lunch, we have to be at least at $4.95, not the $4.20 we had approved in July.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the adult meal pricing?
Does it make sense to make it even $5 to make it easier for everybody or not?
The staff are able to, like students, use an account and it gets billed. They have to submit payments by December and then by the end of the year, hopefully sooner, but they have to submit their payments by then so they can be charged. The ones who do bring cash are usually our substitutes who don't have a balance through the school district. So just so you know that part of the piece.
I would say keep it as low as you can, just because we have a lot of staff that eat and they already weren't happy. I mean, they understand, but if we can save a nickel, we can save a nickel.
You good, Leo?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we do the $4.95 and $2.25 then.
So there's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Any additions to Jake Pride?
I had made 2 corrections today. The Hinckley-Lions had donated $10,000 to the Hinckley Knights to help with those running repairs, so I just made sure to include Hinckley Knights in there. And then the Finlayson Geezy Lions Club for their donation to sports swim lessons for FES students.
Any others?
Brian, did we ever put something in there for their donation to the fitness center? Was that in last month?
For the playground?
Playground.
I believe we had that last month.
I can't remember. Thank you.
Anything else? Next up is our primary levy.
So each September, the board does need to take action on the primary levy. Every school district is doing that this month. Every school district in the state of Minnesota, as a procedural move, does accept the maximum levy. It just lets the district still see where those numbers are gonna come in. And if we set it at the maximum, if we don't set it at the maximum, we can't adjust if there was a need. So the procedural move in September is usually to accept the maximum. We still get the data, get the information from the state where we can maybe under levy, maybe we don't under levy. There's still time to make that decision at the school board. The school board will set the truth in taxation in December, but the kind of procedural move is to set it as the maximum now. As the next 3 months, we're gonna continue to get information on where these numbers are gonna come in and what we could potentially either under levy for or go for the maximum of. I had included just some history on that. The last 2 years, the school district did under levy in unemployment, but like I said, this procedural move of having the maximum levy helps us still get more information between now and December. So I would look for approval to have the levy maximum at this time.
I'll second. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is attendance.
So as you heard Ms. Scullard say, these numbers I typed in shortly right before I sent you the email with the board agenda, and they're pretty volatile even still. Since I sent you this, we've had at least 6 enrollments, but we've had probably 3 or 4 who have left the district, and Jennifer Olander, who's the one who takes care of our enrollment, said there's 5 more sitting on her desk, just getting the paperwork in. So it's still pretty volatile. We are pretty close to what the budget was of 1,020 students. I think when I had calculated this morning, we were right there, with still some sitting on Jennifer's desk. I didn't increase the ALP number to 20 yet, just because some of those kids could be coming out of the high school, and the numbers just might balance out, so I had just left it as it was presented to me on Friday. You heard Mrs. Scullard even give some updates since I typed this. Kindergarten at FES started day one at 5 students, sounds like it's gone down a little bit, and it's moving in all 3 buildings right now. What's not included this is if you remember, the high school does house our Pine County Transition Program for 18 to 21-year-olds. The reason it's not included is because it's technically a SCRED program, but just so you know, we do have those additional 11 students in the building. The high school, as you can see, is still growing, HES is still growing, and Finlayson is lower than what we've seen the last few years. As both Mrs. Hinckley and Ms. Scullard reported, it feels like the staff and student morale was positive the first few weeks, at least the people I talked to and the students I talked to and saw. And our buildings looked great coming out of summer from our custodial staff. We're getting a lot of free and reduced lunch applications in, getting those into the system, and you know, we've talked about Finlayson a little bit, but other than some Finlayson issues of transportation, overall transportation's gone very well the first 5 days of school.
Does anybody have any questions for Brian regarding the first week of school numbers?
Brian, for the elementary schools, do those numbers include preschool?
Yes. Yep.
And we've had preschool since 2017?
Correct.
Okay.
2016, 17, yeah.
Okay.
We will move on to school board goals.
Just sharing the school board goals, kind of a check where we are as we're heading to the end of this school board goals. If you remember last year, Mr. Prater had set the goals earlier for the new board members. We had typically done that, set the school board goals in August. Last year, you guys set it in March, April, just so it can kind of match with hiring, budgeting, things like that. But just wondering if anyone wanted to have discussion on our current goals and things that administration can take forward.
Does anybody have any questions regarding school board goals? Do you guys want to keep it March, April?
Moving the next step.
Next up is the annual transportation report.
So recommending authorization for us to submit this to MDE. We give this information yearly to the school board as far as total miles, field trip mileage, extracurricular mileage, and then kind of costs when it's broken down by the different areas in the district. I did highlight these just so I could remind myself to clarify. I'll go over to this 373,000. It was just in the wrong column when I projected this, so I just moved it over to the correct column. And this 220,000 does include the $50,090 for the Tahoe. So just so I just highlighted that so I remember to talk about it.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the transportation report? If not, I need a motion to approve the annual transportation report for MDE.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the SRO.
Looking for approval for a 2-year contract to continue to have a partnership with the Pine County Sheriff's Office and have an SRO. We pay for 20 hours a week of their time, and this agreement would be good for both this school year and next school year. We do levy for safe schools. We have about $38,000 in that, and this comes in under that at about $27,659 each year. And early estimate or early reports, we have a new SRO this year who's been very visible, very, I think even at the elementary school. So
Very much so.
I've heard a lot of positives of our new
Playing at
SRO.
recess
So.
in the halls. He's great. He's excellent.
The there a motion to approve the SRO contract for 2022-23 and the 2023-24 school years?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second? We'll do a second on that. There's a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? All in favor?
So there's 38,000 in that levy. What's the difference used for?
We can do things with, it's a good question, Joanne was looking to see what the rules are, so I don't have.
To
the-
use that money?
We will
Okay.
still use it, Joanne
Okay.
she and I just talked Friday of what are the rules, what else we will spend it.
Okay.
Since we levied for it
Great.
and have authorization to have that money, she was just gonna go back and look at the rules to see what else would fit in that category. No, that's a good question.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the community ed coordinator.
Recommend the hire of Miss Angela Grahowski as our community education coordinator. Early reports is Ms. Grahowski has started, got off to a great start, doing a great job replacing Lexi Petit. We will follow school board policy 210, which was set last month in regards to compensation for this employee.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the community ed coordinator position? If not, I'll need a motion to approve the community ed education.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next up are our reads for the next three policies.
Joey, was that a 7-0 vote or 6-0 vote?
It would be a 6-0 vote,
Okay, just to clarify it, okay, good, thank you.
but an abstain vote is a 7-0 vote,
Okay,
just so you know.
You should note that she abstained.
yes, good, okay. It just makes it cleaner, I think.
Yes.
I guess I should have.
Okay.
Are there any questions regarding the first read of the next, it looks like 4 policies actually.
Yep, just the next 4 that admin team will begin working on. Many of these we have, but just the first read of these policies.
I just have one question.
Yep.
On the school meals policy, type 2 for payment of meals, it says school district should select one of the following options and delete the remaining options. We discussed which option we use.
We haven't yet. We'll meet with Julie this week and the admin team at the next admin meeting, and we'll bring a recommendation forward which one we'll delete.
Any other questions right now? All right, next up is the activity route discussion.
Well, I would like to reinstate the activity route. I feel like when we made our initial decision in the springtime, we weren't given all the information as far as per route, how many students rode each route. And since there is quite a few that do ride the Finlayson route, I don't think it is fair or ideal that the Finlayson parents have to drive all the way down to Hinckley to get their students. They should be given the same opportunity to pick their kids up at the elementary school as the Hinckley parents get to pick their kids up at the high school.
Is that the farthest it goes, is the elementary school for Finlayson?
No, it goes all the way out to Geezy. It does the activity bus, if like there's a kid, like if Anna Dagerstrom was going home on the activity bus, that activity bus driver would drive her all the way to Geezy, turn around and then come back. And that was Scott Graber, so he was driving all the way to Geezy with his bus and then driving it all the way out past Cloverdale to go home. And then making some stops in between there.
My only comment would be that we have just as many riders that ride out east. So just reinstating it for Finlayson only, I don't feel like.
But looking at each individual route, especially in the fall, and I know there's probably more participants that play volleyball and football than there is, basketball. Finlayson route actually has real comparable numbers to even the Highway 48 route. And the Brook Park and the Prushville route, I think they have like 2 or 3. I don't feel it's fair to penalize Finlayson parents or even going on east if 2 of their other routes just don't have enough riders because their kids just aren't playing.
So are you saying we should reinstate the one that's 20 miles east as well as the one that's too easy?
Yeah, because the drop-off is 22 miles from the school here out to the gas station.
I think it just needs to be relooked at, because when we were presented this information, there was 3 riders. There was an average of 3 riders. And it wasn't at a board meeting, but I was told that those riders would be taken care of. They would find a ride home somehow for them. I think we need to look at not using buses. Like, we have other transportation vehicles that can be used. It doesn't need to be
And
a big
especially
bus
with the
for-
junior high numbers
I know.
are increasing too. So how does this affect then junior high kids who normally probably would play, and now their parents are like, well, I'm sorry, you can't get to practice every day, but you still go out for the sport. Well, it's not fair to the student, because they can't be at all the practices. It's not fair to coach, trying to coach them if they're not gonna be at the practices, or even their other teammates.
Because during the season, if you look at the numbers during the seasons, the numbers are higher. In between, they're not, so that brings your average down.
And when there's games,
So
obviously.
then you're not gonna run you're not opposed to running it on those? I mean, how do you propose running it without that? In the
I
slow
propose
season?
not using the bus. You have
If there's
other
only
vehicles.
5 riders, we can use the.
But it's my understanding that we don't always have
Yeah,
4 type 3 vehicles here.
I asked Sarah that. We have 2 Suburbans, we have a Tahoe, and we have a van. The van's used for driver's education. So that one, some days it's used for driver's ed, some days it's not. She told me one of the Suburbans, because of the route pickup, isn't always left in Hinckley. The driver might bring it home because their first stop is closer to home. So what she could guarantee was we'd have a Tahoe, 1 Suburban, and the Escape, which the Escape only holds 4 kids. We could have another one in the minivan, we could have the other Suburban, she just wasn't sure of that when I asked her. So we have type 3 vehicles, but the way they're currently scheduled, they're not always in Hinckley at that time. So if we were to look at that, that could be a scheduling logistical thing that could maybe get in the way or have to be worked around.
But last year too, did we have the students sign up the day of?
Yeah, and that was a pain because kids sign up and then they wouldn't show to the bus, so then we'd have a bus show up without any kids on it because the kids wouldn't ride the bus. Or they sign up, or they don't sign up, and then they're like, well, how come there wasn't a bus here? Well, because you didn't sign up. And every day you would have to go through that every single day. There's some kids that I knew that were riding every day, so it was easy, I just put them on a list, and that would be part of the list that I emailed Sarah. But a lot of the times kids would say they would ride, they're riding and they're not, or they just show up thinking that there is a ride because they don't listen. Because they just don't, they're kids. I mean, you can tell them 15 times a day that you gotta sign up for the activity bus and they don't.
Do the parents ever communicate with each other and say, I'll drive this day, you drive that day? So it's not every day?
I mean, I guess, I don't know if they do or not. My kids ride the Finlayson bus actually because that's where we live, is up by Finlayson, and if they didn't wanna ride the bus, I would come get them. That's just, I don't know, they participate in a lot of things. They're in 3 different sports, and we just always make sure that if there was an activity bus, like, we make sure that there's a ride for them. Now they can drive, so that's a little bit easier, but.
Are we down in ball participation because there is no activity bus?
I have only had 1 complaint of no activity bus, and that is it.
Did you ask all of them, or they just?
It's the same kids that went out last year that are out this year for junior high, like for the 7th and 8th grade, or for the last year 7th graders that are out this year for 8th grade, they're all the same kids. So, I've only had 1 complaint from a parent like, oh, you're really not gonna have an activity bus? Nope, okay, and then it sounds like they figured it out.
I think since we are the Hinckley-Finlayson School District, that we need to provide support to our Finlayson side of the school district. So I feel it would be prudent to have at least, for now, some transportation to the Finlayson Elementary School, so those who live in the Finlayson area can have the benefit of picking their child up from the Finlayson Elementary School, just as parents that live closest to the Hinckley School can pick their kids up at the Hinckley School.
I agree that we're Hinckley-Finlayson, but I don't think we can just pick and choose, because Lake Lena is what, 23, 24?
30.
I mean, we can't just pick and choose. I don't feel like we can pick and choose where the routes are gonna go,
Or you could set it
because
up
it's
where
Finlayson
you
or
could pick up your
Hinckley. That, I
child
mean, we're
at the
dividing
school.
us right now.
Hinckley-Finlayson High School or Finlayson Elementary School.
Right.
You can pick them up at either school.
A choice.
What would the cost be if we did 2 routes? Any idea?
I don't know, I did run just what it would cost to run type 3 routes, and we broke it 2 different ways, because we have it in the support staff handbook 2 different ways. So one way is if we just, and this was assuming we had 4, I just budgeted, assuming if we did it, we would, I shouldn't assume, but just assuming if we did it, we would add all 4. So one way I budgeted or pulled money was using the activity route rate. For 4 routes, that was roughly just under 19,000. If we use it in the sports staff handbook with using the extra driving rate and 90-minute minimum that's in the sports staff handbook, again, for 4 routes, that is 22,600 roughly. So somewhere between 18,800 and 22,600 if you add them as type 3 routes. If you remember when we had buses last year, what it cost us, I did pull that number too, when we ran it as buses, was $44,332, which we did not budget for.
Is that just driver costs, or is that gas?
She broke
and
it
stuff
down,
too?
nope, she had it down as where they were going by drivers, FICA, para, workman's
Okay.
comp, she broke it down by the benefits too.
So
And how much it would cost. to
Sounds like
drive
it'd be
them.
cheaper to get attaboys, is what it sounds like.
Mandy, do you know how many students in Finlayson are participating in sports? Like, how many students are we talking about potentially having?
I wish I had my other sheet sitting in front of me, because then I'd really know, because I have something on my desk.
Like, if every student athlete from Finlayson was going to ride the activity bus, how many could we potentially have? There's a better way for me to ask that. Sorry.
I believe when Brian showed me the sheet, it looked like there was an average of 9.
Yeah. For September, it was 8.
The
Well, that's just-
September-
That was fall sports.
Yeah, that's just fall
Okay.
sports, I'm just trying to, you want like a number of what we'd have right now, right, Heather?
Well, yeah, just
Like
like,
7 through 12, like roughly?
yeah, if
Because I
there
mean,
was-
not all kids have their driver's license
Yeah,
when they're older, and some of them do utilize that bus, you know?
yeah, cause if it's that, then we already know the escape's not gonna work because it's only 4 kids. Like, how many does the Tahoe fit and how many does the Suburban fit?
Tahoe, she said fits 8, Suburban fits 8, Tahoe fits 7.
So if all of those kids, I mean, just thinking, like, if all of those students from Finlayson Road, none of these type 3 vehicles would be big enough. So we'd be looking at least 2 of those type 3 vehicles going just to Finlayson. So what about the other kids on other routes? So I think, to be fair, we would almost have to look at how much it would cost to bring a bus back in.
The other issue you could run into is if we did the type 3s, a lot of our drivers bring buses home at the end of their route, just depending where their first stop is. Depending on who would drive the type 3 routes, they could have to then get back in their own car, come back to town, get the type 3 vehicle, do the route, come back, go home. Maybe there's a workaround, that's just something, as it's planned right now, that we would have to potentially work around too.
So Brian, you said the bus then for gas and driver for a year for 4 routes is 44,332.
That's what Joanne had given me, yep, was 44, it's what we spent last year, $44,332.58.
And then the type 3 vehicle then for the same 4 routes, you said was the range you had?
Yep, 18,900 to 22,600.
That's going 4 routes.
That's doing all 4.
You asked Finlayson, I have 6 kids, plus, well, 6 kids, my kids wouldn't ride either with the Dagerstrom kids, so I have 6 kids that it would affect right now, for fall sports.
Okay.
And most of them are registered, not all of them, but most of them are registered in here, so there might be maybe 1 or 2 to add to that, so we wouldn't have a type 3 transportation if all those kids chose to ride on any given day,
Okay.
where they'd all fit in there.
Would the Finlayson parents be okay if they went just to Finlayson Elementary?
Yes,
Okay,
that was what we were.
that's what you asked for, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And to reinstate this, we would have to go into our fund balance.
Yeah, so I pulled that too, and Joanne still, just with all the new hires, doesn't have perfect numbers. But I did ask her just kind of where are we at as far as, you know, what we were projected to spend versus what, if everything goes as planned, what we would spend. Right now, we have money that hasn't been spent of about $89,430. However, with that, we also have 4 positions out there that we haven't hired yet that she didn't factor into that 89,000. So one of them's a .5 teacher, and then some para needs. So most of that 89,000 could be pretty close to being spoken for, depending on how hiring goes. At least of what, you know, as far as what the budget was. So our fund balance is right at about that 25%, you know, with where we're at, with what we've spent. But if we get all these hires that we've already gone out looking for, we're kind of sitting at, we would have to go into our fund balance.
Just to add a route, just our other school in Finlayson would not be financially that much.
I would have to pull that. I don't know how her math calculates because the numbers don't add up to 18,000 the way I see them. So I would have to get her to pull that, what it would cost just to go to Finlayson or just to go, you know, anywhere else in the district.
Ryan, could you break it down just on one night, one evening where the activity bus would go one route on a bus versus a type 3 vehicle? What would the cost be?
So one night a week?
Well, no, not one night a week, but just say, what does it cost per night to send a type 3 vehicle to Finlayson, and what does it cost per night to send the bus to Finlayson? Just so I'm looking at a per night basis instead of an annualized basis. I'm just curious.
I can ask her to pull that.
I think it'd be great to support our kids who are in sports. I mean, take my hats off to kids who step away from the computers at home and the internet and are willing to participate in school extracurricular activities. So I would love to encourage our children to do so in Finlayson, who live in that part of our school district. Not to take away from children who live in other parts of the school district, but we did combine and consolidate with Finlayson, and I think we need to provide a service to Finlayson, to drop off at the Finlayson Elementary School. I think that's fair.
Otherwise, we could look at having practices at the Finlayson Elementary School.
Yeah.
Needs to.
I agree with Jody though, that if we're gonna add any routes, I think we have to at least keep 2. Because the numbers justify, they're so close to each other. The other 2 are basically less than half.
Well, do we have to look at, there's a minimum ridership? Because Manny was talking about one student, Geezy, that Graver was driving at some times. So if we put a route on, is it gonna be all year round, and we're gonna catch one person? Or do we put minimum of 6 people on the bus? Otherwise, we don't run the bus. Because if you open it up to we're gonna run it, you're still gonna get, at times, nobody on it, or one person on it, that type of thing. And you've already said you're gonna run it.
Sorry, Dave, and that was the reason why we were having them sign up, because it was becoming such an issue, but that is the biggest, well, one of the biggest hassles of my day. I'm very, very busy, and I don't have time to sit down and be like, oh, are you riding the activity bus today? Are you riding the activity bus today? Like, I need to know ahead of time, and if these kids don't tell me, I can only do so much, you know, trying to get that communicated to Sarah so she can get a route driver in by the end of the day. It doesn't give us a lot of time. And I mean, not to be selfish, it's my time too, but I'm very busy doing lots of different things, and I barely have time in my day to even eat lunch, let alone try to get kids on an activity bus route. I mean, there's days that I don't even get to eat lunch. Bonnie can attest to that. It's a very, 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 very busy job that we just sometimes don't have time to like sit down and ask kids that every single day. Like, maybe there's a better way of doing it, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
it's hard to like compare with other schools because nobody runs it. You know, you do it by season, but then there's games that they don't ride.
Yep.
So those days that are games, do we have?
and we had good ridership in the fall, and then by the
challenging.
spring that just fell off because not as many kids are participating in spring sports. I mean, there's just not as many of them. And they have more things that they can do, but I don't know why that is, but
So if we cancel activity buses in the morning by 10 o'clock, do we still pay a driver?
no.
No.
And then there were sometimes like we'd have a kid like show up out here, and then we didn't have anybody to drive them, and Sarah was here, so she would just drive them home. That was usually a Brook Park route, because she was on her way home anyway, so she would just take them out of the kindness of her own heart, even though they hadn't signed up. They're just out there like hanging out, where's my bus?
But is that fair of us then to ask drivers to not know day by day? Is
Gotta
that,
keep their
is
schedule
that,
open.
right, is that fair of us to ask them to do that? I struggle with that.
Would it be better to do it weekly? You sign up on Monday for the week. Are you
And then-
going, which days are you riding?
You have to make sure that they're actually riding, because that changes too, like parents have to be swinging through town and we'll just grab them or whatever.
Or, you know, when they sign up for, like, when they do their sports registrations, say, you know, like, have like a form, like, are you planning on riding the activity bus? And if they say yes, and maybe like a 3 straight, like, if you signed up and we're expecting you, but maybe for 3 times you didn't show up, then I'm sorry, like, I don't,
Right now, or last year, we were running the activity bus route 4 days or 3?
4 days, because we didn't run it on Wednesdays, so no activity bus on Wednesdays.
And what was our ridership like on a Friday? Because that would be a big, probably non-rider day.
I would bet Fridays are pretty poor, you know, in the fall, we have 4 football
So
games.
could we look at the activity bus 3 days?
or, you
You know,
know,
Tuesday, Thursday, usually when they have games,
Mhm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
true.
it's hard. It's, cause it is it's so hit and miss.
And it really depends on like what's going on, like that, yeah, it's super hit or miss, there's really not a good solution for it at all.
Because you don't wanna punish those families that, yep, we signed up for the activity bus at the beginning of the sports season, our kids are gonna ride it every day. Like, those are the people that we wanna put it in place for, but we also wanna make sure we have kids riding.
Some commitment.
And I will be honest in saying, I feel like if we open it up for the Finlayson Elementary School, which I totally get the frustrations there, I do feel like we can't pick and choose. Like, if we open it up for that, I feel like we do have to like take care of those Lena kids too, because a lot of them do play sports. So I feel like,
What would be a good drop site out there?
It goes to the gas
goes
station.
It goes to the gas station, and that's as far as they go on that one, is just out there, and then they turn around and it's all, everybody's dropped off in 48, unlike, you know, like when they're going to Finlayson, they'll go all the way out to Easy. And then we kind of modified that route to go through Sandstone to drop off some of the kids that lived up that direction too. We had, I wanna say last spring, Sarah had a drop-off point at Chris's, kind of like what we do in the morning and the afternoon route. So we did have a drop-off for those students that lived in the Ascove area or like up by Sandstone kind of. Because otherwise that bus would never, if you lived in Sandstone, it would drop you off at that Grindstone crossing right there, like where the bike trail comes through and you can turn on Finlayson Road. You can go north on Finlayson Road or go on Grindstone Lake Road. That's where they used to drop all the Sandstone kids, which isn't necessarily real safe, but there's kids that got dropped off there all the time actually and would walk almost all the way to Finlayson, or all the way to Sandstone on the bike trail that is like semi there right now, so it was kinda nice when we had that option where we could drop them off and I don't know, drop them off at Chris's where it was maybe a little bit safer. I mean, we never had parents complain about it, but I guess as a parent, I probably wouldn't want my kid walking out there sometimes, because it's a little shifty that way, but.
So what direction does the four go?
So we have, one goes 48, one goes towards Brook Park, one goes out west of town on 18, and then one goes north, to Finlayson.
Could we consolidate Brook Park and 18, Crushel?
Well, we never had kids riding the Crushel route, really, we had
Crushel
one.
and.
Oh, Crushel
Yeah.
or Brook Park.
We really only had one kid ever ride that Crushel bus, and he was hit and miss, he would sign up and then never show up, so. I feel like that's been
The
exhausted.
Crushel and Brook Park
Yeah.
averaged pretty, 2 or 3 kids. Finlayson and out to Lake Lena throughout the year averaged about 5. So they had a higher average throughout the year. The other 2 had pretty small.
And those would be the two that I would be more concerned about, is Finlayson and the 48 one.
I mean, back in the day, we actually had all 4 bus routes, and they all just came out here and parked, and then the coaches would get lists to, well, the 80, and then they would send that off on to, Sarah or Shar, or whoever it was down at transportation, so like, you had an idea of what kids might be riding, but, it wasn't something that was concrete, which I just feel like that's just kind of a waste of district money now to do something like that with the amount of kids that we have riding, I guess. I know, I guess Sarah and I deal with it every single day, so, just my opinion, kind of.
We also don't wanna see kids not participate in sports because they don't have a ride home, so
How many of those are there?
Hmm?
How many of those are there? Is there a poll or is there any
Of
information
kids
on
that
say, I would have
would
gone out
play.
for football, but I can't get home?
Yeah, that would be good to know.
Yeah.
Mandy, have you heard any of that so far this school year?
Nope, not a thing, actually. Not one kid complained that we don't have an activity bus, and like I said, I only had one parent inquiry about it, basically, so,
Have you heard anything from your coaches? Have they heard from parents?
no. I think my coaches kinda like it a little bit better, cause then they can have practice till 5:30, and there isn't that, barrier of kids that, oh, I have to catch the activity bus, so I have to leave 15 minutes before everybody else to get on the bus. Like that kind of stuff, cause that does happen when we run activity bus, to make sure that they meet the bus up there when it leaves.
Are you
So-
aware of any students who haven't been able to get home after practice so far, or
Nope,
maybe they were waiting for parents, anything like that?
no. Today I saw Candace Lenzen waiting, but she's also a homeschool student, but she's waiting for her brother to save a ride, so she wouldn't typically ride the bus anyways, cause she's homeschooled, we don't provide transportation for that, so.
When did we start this activity or?
Years ago.
How long, anybody know?
Back when I was
Under?
I was
100 years ago, is that what you're saying?
Well, 35 years
It
ago.
was probably
Bonnie.
close when we consolidated,
40 years
because I
ago.
believe I used to take the activity bus back up to Finlayson.
Cause even when my
I had
boys
activity
were in
bus
junior
too.
high and they were taking the activity bus home, I asked
Yeah.
them, well, how many were on the bus? Be like 8 to 10 was probably about the average, which when I looked at the monthly report from Finlayson, it's still right about that.
You're wrong.
Mostly in the fall and it was.
The fall was used more. It averaged out for the year to be right around 5, but the fall was higher use, spring was less. And then the winter season's hard because the boys and girls are at different times. If they all practice at the same time, maybe we'd have higher ridership, but the boys go
We have split seasons.
for half a season, the girls go the other half, so the numbers are split for basketball.
I could see in the winter you'd be able to get away with the Suburbans and whatnot, because of that true split season.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like the older kids just don't ride the bus as much, cause they're more invested in practicing and that kind of stuff, and
They usually have their friends too that they're.
yep, that can drive them, or whatever it may be,
Or maybe we look at it like season by season and see like what the need is for each season, cause maybe like there's some things that we wouldn't need. I don't know, I wish there was a perfect thing, I don't know, I want kids to be able to play if they want to play.
And just like, I'm on the activity bus of writers from last year, like the spreadsheet that Sarah has shared with I know with me and Brian for sure. And like, I'm just in January right here, and like, she's got notes for some of these dates where these kids showed up. On 120, I drove sub 2 and took Scott and Doug's kids, so sometimes she consolidated routes and she used a Suburban instead. On the 21st, she drove sub 2, drove Ronnie's kids. Scott came in and didn't have any, so he drove Doug's kids because kids were signed up and then nobody showed up. And then on the 31st, Mickey had one sign up, but she got to school and 4 more kids came to her bus who didn't sign up. So like, every day was like a random day, like, oh, what are we gonna get today? And that's just like some of the notes that I'm looking at right now. Like, she was good at taking notes most of the time, so I'm guessing like everything is kind of spot on. Then you get to January and it's kind of messed up, you know, just with kids. She just has some different, in February, kind of the same stuff kind of happened a little bit to her. She just had notes in there where kids would just show up and randomly, or like she had to mix stuff up because we were short drivers too. That's kind of been an issue. I mean, we almost don't have bus drivers to take kids to these events to start with. So I've looked at her sheet. I mean, she's still waiting for some bus drivers to sign up and that kind of stuff, just taking the kids to away events when we need her to. So, I mean, that's no easy task either. So we just don't have as many bus drivers as we used to, I don't think, or maybe we have more routes, I don't know. So it does look like she's used the Tahoe a few times in the last few months at school, in the spring too. Just because Doug had one that was riding or 2, so she would take the Tahoe out instead. And Doug wouldn't always come in, like somebody else would take that route, so.
Anything else? So I believe there's a motion and a second.
I'm sorry, what's the motion
To reinstate the activity bus
or,
to Finlayson,
okay, just
To the
Finlayson?
Or only Finlayson?
to the school. Would you want it to also to go out to the gas station for 48 for that route too?
I
Well,
would
there's,
go for-
wait, first there's a motion and a second. Are we gonna, we have to do something with that first.
We should do something on that, and then it's,
So either you, I think you could take back your motion and then do a new one, or we vote.
Okay, well, I will make the motion that we reinstate the activity bus going out to Finlayson and then one out to the gas station out on 48.
I'll second the motion.
Any more discussion? My only question is, what are we gonna do next month when someone's here from Brook Park or Crushel? Are we going to,
right now, we don't have
and then we're
any-
back up to the 44,000?
If they can justify the numbers, you know, similar to what Finlayson and having 48 is, we might have to reconsider it. But I don't foresee that happening.
My question, Leo,
We went off of a yearly rate and it was like 5 point,
I have it here. The Finlayson was average 5.1, 48 average 4.9, Brook Park average 2.7, and up to Crushel was 1.95. That was for the whole year.
so is there a cutoff or we don't run it? I mean,
well, that's what I'm asking,
That's-
what are we
that's the
gonna do
question.
next
You say,
month
well,
when
when is
someone's
it?
here?
so, you know, you go, Brook Park comes in and said, well, you only got 1 or 2, okay. Are those kids less important? Or do you say, then on the nights where there's 1 or 2 going to Finlayson, do you not do that one? I mean, how does someone make a schedule out here? I mean, we gotta be consistent here, so if you make it a rule to not run one because there's real low ridership, that doesn't guarantee that the high ridership's always got capacity either.
But their track record, it shows as of last year, the numbers were up there too.
Does that, the 2 kids in Brook Park that ride it, are they more important than the ones that go out east? I mean, if you add one, because there's higher numbers, I get that.
It sounds like though
You can
we
see
are
there,
trying
you
to
know.
save money by using the type 3 than taking a bus out.
Correct.
Or combining routes, but like Heather said, you combine routes, then Doug doesn't have an activity route that he sat around waiting for that night.
Which I don't think he was sad about. I'm just saying, like, I mean, he wasn't like, oh God, I don't have to do that.
Our bus driver's willing to do that though.
Well,
And
right,
that could be another
that's the
part
other
of this.
thing.
And type 3 might be a little harder just because of some of them take buses home
And
after their afternoon route and then to come back to town. So there might be some logistics.
Cause there is one out east that stays out east, a type 3.
Correct.
And so like, on Friday night, the cheerleading, they take one of those type 3?
Yep.
For away
Okay.
games, correct.
So Finlayson would need either the Tahoe or the Suburban, right, because they have 6. So, I mean, the escape would work for probably Brook Park and Crushel with 4 kids.
I think we need to make it, if they come up with a certain amount of kids to ride it, to come back, since this year we're going off of last year's ridership. So if we relatively have 5 riders that go to Finlayson, 5 riders that go out east, and only 2 to Brook Park and Crushel, 3 to Brook Park and Crushel, they have to come up with 2 more riders for this year to figure out where to go, because I don't think it's fiscally responsible of the district to pay $44,000 a year for on average 3.95 kids, so I'll go to 4 kids. I just don't.
So Jody, that average is for all 4 routes.
Yes,
How about let's just right size it,
I mean, that's $11,000 a student. Right? On average.
and I just think we need to communicate with the people who are interested in it and the parents who really need it. And there needs to be some kind of commitment from the parents for their children that are gonna be riding this type 3 vehicle or a bus if needed.
Which I agree
And
with.
if-
I mean,
and if they
parents have
don't
to work
show-
with us too.
Right.
I agree with that. I lived 23 miles out of town growing up here.
Right.
You have to do what you have to do too.
You know, it's a liquid thing, like Mandy was saying, all of a sudden the parents are in town, uncle's in town, you can ride with us. So the plans are constantly changing to the last minute. How do you change everyone that's scheduling kids, hauling kids, all those things at the last minute?
I mean,
So
we
it's
have
just a liquid-
170 athletes.
It's just a liquid thing, it's nothing, you get a commitment from parents, what's the commitment? Money? A promise that we're going to, if my son was signed up and now he doesn't go, and is it a monetary promise? Where's the promise? It's just broken, like Mandy says. Kids are supposed to sign up and then they don't go on the bus, I mean, it's just a nightmare. Who makes the promise, who backs it up with what?
Or just keep it simple. I mean, just have one route to Finlayson Elementary School. We consolidated with Finlayson, let's keep it simple, let's start there. And if we need to add a 2nd, 3rd, or 4th route, we can, as we get, phone calls from parents that say, hey, we want help with our kid on going a different direction. Then we can expand, but I think for now, maybe it's a good start to just send a bus or transportation to our counterpart, we consolidated with Finlayson, and I think that would be a great commitment to those in Finlayson whom we consolidated with.
But years ago, Toby, we consolidated with Brook Park too, many years ago. They had their own school and they joined ours, so. I don't
Sure.
know.
Mandy, has it been many nights where there has hasn't been anybody in Finlayson or out 48?
Usually those are the two, you would almost,
There's
probably every
always
night have at
somebody.
least one kid to ride.
So there's always
there.
somebody where it
Yes.
would go.
One, lots of times one.
Yeah,
But there's always somebody, it's not like.
but there is always
it's not like
somebody, yes.
Brook Park or Crushel where it's hit or miss. So if we start with those two,
Brook Park usually has one.
if we start with those two and if the need arises to add,
Yeah, Brook Park would be one because the other kids that rode that bus transferred to Moore. So they don't,
and was it because we didn't have busing?
no, it had nothing to do with busing whatsoever.
I think if for no other reason, I think we should provide service to those parents who showed up tonight and voiced a need. And I think we should fill their need because they voiced a concern and they showed up.
Christy was here with us too, as she showed up as well to support this idea.
Okay.
And our neighbor, she had a thing going on, but she wanted to be here, she's right next door to us. And that bus that goes out to Geezy, it would turn around every single night in our road on Northridge Road. So
Well,
it
then-
never actually went to Geezy.
That means she wasn't riding the bus then. I'm saying it potentially can go that far.
Sure.
And actually farther, if we had kids that were a little bit farther than that, I'm sure Scott would have taken them all the way to their door.
And having the parents responsible to sign up their kids, so there is that responsibility as opposed to entrusting a kid to say, yeah, I'm gonna ride the bus and then not do it. It hold the parents accountable for that.
I guess I need to know what the motion is.
The current motion was, correct me if I'm wrong, add an activity bus to Finlayson and out to 48 was the last amended motion. That was first
Yes.
and second.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to do a friendly amendment or vote on that. That was the current motion.
I'm just having a hard time, like now even though like that, if there's one kid in Brook Park, like,
There, I can guarantee there will be at least 2 kids in Brook Park if we bring the activity bus back.
But I thought you said.
They
that
haven't
would
complained to
have-
me about not having it, but I know they would utilize the service if it was available. Like, they're fine with it not, they're fine with not having it, but they would utilize it if it came back, is what I'm saying. And like for me, yeah, to come in clutch because I am in like 5 different places at one time sometimes, like, yeah, it would be nice to have my kids do that, but I can figure it out myself and I can get my kids home. I don't know, like, I can do that on my own and I have a way to get them home and that kind of stuff. Other people might not, but I can find a way home for my kids. And now that they drive, it's a lot easier, like I said. Like before when they didn't drive, yeah, it was kind of nice to have that option, but I didn't absolutely need it and I could have figured it out. But that's my perspective is myself being a parent, so. Not everybody's in the same situation. Situations are different.
So our motion is the same.
Yes.
There's no friendly amendment for the second time.
So activity bus to Finlayson and out 48 out east.
And you're seconding, Toby.
I'll second those 2 routes, yes.
can I just ask one more question? So what happens then when this, you know, if this is approved and parents then are aware that, yeah, we're bringing back the activity bus route for Finlayson and then 48, and those park parents see it, then are we gonna have to come back together again? Because,
Just ask.
right, I just wanna be like, I'm prepared for that.
We could have to come back and have.
I think it has to go off a ridership.
And I totally agree.
Like, there has to be a minimum ridership.
Yeah. To make it worth it for the driver as well.
Maybe then they can convince more Brook Park or Crushel kids to come out for sports.
What, minimum of 5? And if they don't have 5 for that night, they don't run it?
So then it'd be a
I mean,
day-by-day basis again, where if you're not signed up by, 10 o'clock, so that the,
I think we did noon last
We did.
year.
We did like
Between
3
10 and
o'clock.
9,
It was
yeah.
noon, but it was more like 3 o'clock. And then I'm scrambling at the end trying to get a hold of Sarah, who was driving both. Like, she drives a lot of the time too, because we are short bus drivers, like.
I would like to see though, you get like 2 times.
But I
And
think
then
it
you
needs
don't
to be
have
fair
privilege
for
to the
everybody.
activity bus. If you can't be there when they when you sign up, I feel like you lose your privilege to ride the school bus then.
But I
Activity
also
bus.
like Holly's idea of like maybe making the parents a little more accountable, like, which I will attest to that, Holly's very good at that, because she's like, Annabelle's gonna ride the activity bus every day, okay, and she did, so like,
It's
and
just
I knew
you're
that
not
was
always-
happening, so it would make it easy for me, because I just had a running list of kids that always rode the activity bus.
You just don't always have that communication with parents.
No.
I mean, it's just,
That's
that's
reality
the reality.
also.
It sounds easy.
In
Just
some
super
years,
easy.
yeah.
It's not that easy.
And I would say we don't just use the activity bus for sports.
Right.
We have
And we
other,
didn't
we have other
before.
ridership because of.
Yeah, I mean, a majority of them ride the bus because of that, but some rode because of homework club, which I don't think we have yet, right?
Well, we're having that
But we
back.
will be having that, or they could
The
ride it
play.
if there was detention, you know, like, so there's other factors that came into that as well. So I mean, it wasn't just athletes riding it the last however many years, those kids have been mixed in with that as well. And they would just have a bus pass to ride or whatever it was that we needed to give them for Sarah.
So those people are involved, are factored in with the
Yes.
number of riders,
Yes,
detention kids?
homework club kids, if they're staying after with the teacher, we could give them a bus pass for as long as they didn't leave the building.
Last year, we had less detention homework club just because we didn't have
So you didn't have
staff to
somebody to run it.
oversee it. So last year's numbers were a little down, just we didn't have staffing to oversee detention or homework club last year. So just so the board knows that too.
So then as a policy, if, let's just say, pick the number, 5 kids gotta be signed up by 10 o'clock. And at 4 o'clock or 5, whenever this bus leaves, now there's 3, does it stay parked and those other 3 figure out how to get home?
No,
I mean,
I
it's
guess
gotta be
I would
kinda
say,
concrete here.
my understanding is there will be a Finlayson route, there will be an out east route. If another route wants to be added, like Rush Over Park,
Okay.
they need 5 riders.
But if we don't have, what if we don't have 5 riders for 40 in Finlayson?
But they have typically, in
Yeah,
history,
typically, I guess
have
that's
had
true.
5 riders.
True.
So I guess the only way I feel like we can make a decision this year is off of last year and so on and so on. So I guess that's why I said 5. There's no good answer.
You say no other school district has an activity buses?
We were the last school district to have it in our area.
But we're also one of the other districts have 2 schools in Trenton.
Yes.
That's it still.
What about the distance traveled?
That's how I look at it, Dave, but it's fine. So we have a motion, we have a second. Are we ready to vote? Any more discussion? How are we gonna put that into place? You're gonna put that in this, you're gonna talk to Mandy.
Yep, I would talk to
Ken's
Sarah and
going to-
Mandy, we'd have to make sure we'd have drivers that can do it, once the board approves it. Then I'd work with Sarah and Mandy on making it happen.
Okay. So,
Can I ask a question? Is this activity bus for type 3 route or school bus?
I'd say leave it up to administration to figure out.
Leave it up to administration?
well, it's gonna depend on how many types
How many
we
kids?
have.
And how many kids
So
might
how
be
many kids
riding?
sign up? So not just set for type, could be a school bus. Okay.
Alright. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll do roll call. Leo,
Yes.
Toby,
Yes.
Shelley,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Angela,
Yes.
Jody, yes. Motion passes 6-1. That concludes the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.